First of all, good evening and welcome to our second LFA event, which is about caring for the well-being of your profession. This event and this series is sponsored by Ibstock Bricks, so thank you to Ibstock Bricks for supporting us in this series of talks. My name is Diane Small, I'm the Director of RIBA London region, and so for probably the first time, I'm just going to be your host. I'm going to step back and introduce you to the chair for today, who is Marsha Ramoop, and Marsha is our new RIBA EDI Director. So Marsha, over to you.
Good evening. Welcome to this LFA event, and I'm privileged really to have been asked to be part of it this evening. I am Marsha Ramoop and the Director of Inclusion at the RIBA, and yesterday marked my 4-month anniversary in the role. So I'm still getting to grips with the organisation and the wider sector. However, one of the most frequently asked questions I've had so far is architecture worse than, say, the media when it comes to inclusion? And you may know the media is the environment that I've come from. And in all honesty, I'm not sure that it is in many ways. And the reason that I say that is even though you might have increasing representation on TV, for example, and perhaps it is easier to get into the profession, you just have to look at the boards and the executives of all the major media organisations to see that if you're not white, male, able-bodied, living in London and the South East, the likelihood is that you're not at the table. And I just have to mention the name Piers Morgan and Julie Burchill, who really aren't being shut down by the wider media establishment. And so architecture, like the rest of society we're socialised in, is rooted in systemic, political, ideological and economic bias, all of which that we have to address. So I obviously have many thoughts on this topic tonight and may chip in now and again, but this event tonight is about our panel's thoughts. And I'd like to ask the panel, before we get to questions, to introduce themselves and to briefly state in one sentence, if possible, what do they think demonstrates an organisation that cares about inclusive culture? And I'd like to start with Mohammed.
Thank you, Marsha, for that introduction. My name is Mohammed. I'm the studio director for Stephen George and Partners. We're a RIBA chartered practice, and I'm based in London. I'm part of their mentoring strategy throughout their 5 offices, and also part of their diversity and inclusiveness group. For me, diversity and inclusiveness is basically means that we give equal opportunities to all, and it's something that I tend to push organically rather than HR driven. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Melanie, what do you think demonstrates an organisation that cares about inclusive culture? And please do introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Melanie Martin. I'm from ORMS Architects, Associate Director there. And I think for our practice, of which we are 70 London-based practice, I think what's important is ensuring we have a culture that is educated and aware. And I think the reality of UDI at the moment is it's changing. It's changing month by month, and that means we all need to have a certain sensitivity to the change. And so we're at the early stages, although we've had involvement for years in the local community, of understanding that education is about us and our team having a common platform, but also being able to help and support education at all levels, from young children to higher learning and beyond. But I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Harriet, same to you, please.
Hello. First, thanks for having me. My name's Harriet Miller. I'm Managing Director for David Chipperfield Architects. I have been with DCA for about 2.5 years now, and like you, Marsha, I moved from another industry, so there's a few thoughts there as well. But I think what I and we at DCA think demonstrates care about inclusive culture is as a commitment to action, and I think that isn't always straightforward, but I think that I agree wholeheartedly with Melanie that we need to educate ourselves and be aware, and then move towards action, be that school outreach, university outreach, mentoring, apprenticeships, and many other initiatives that are now gathering traction within the industry. Yeah.
Thank you, Harriet. Sarah.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here and very pleased to be part of this discussion. So I'm an architect and filmmaker, and I currently run a small practice, but previously I come from a large practice background, or have kind of lots of experience in that context. I make films in and around I suppose some of the issues that we'll be discussing today, to do with kind of gender and race within the industry of architecture. I am a recently elected RIBA representative for London. I am Vice Chair of Women in Architecture, and also the founder of the XXAOC project, which stands for Female Architects of Colour. And in answer to Marsha's question, I think that what demonstrates, or what would demonstrate an industry that cares, is one where there's equality of access, equality of progression through the profession, and also safe environments, safe workplaces, safe workspaces, safe education spaces. Yeah, I think it's imperative that people feel safe in a work context. So yes, I think so. These three things. I have more to say about that, but they would be the three things that I would highlight.
Thank you, Sarah. And Chris, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Chris Darling, and I'm the founder and managing director of Darling Associates. We're about 80 strong architectural practice. I think the events of last summer sort of shocked us out of our complacency, and increasing the diversity within our practice is something that's absolutely top of our priority list, perhaps along with or equal with sustainability right now as we go forward. And it's caused us to take a long hard look at our own organisation and what we do. We've always been an inclusive practice. We liken ourselves to a family. Our people are our only asset, and we make sure they're loved and looked after. We've started a whole range of initiatives, and we're not sort of paying lip service to this. We're pushing as hard as we can. It's complex, and making progress is often like wading through treacle, but I think we are getting there. And I'm personally sort of very excited to be on this panel and involved in this really important initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So some really interesting points there, and essentially I just asked that question so you do my homework for me. If we can pick up especially on your point, Sarah, about safety, because when we talk about caring for a colleague's community, safety seems to be quite a fundamental term. Why is, sorry, I was just going to ask, yeah, why is it, do you think, that people feel unsafe?
That's an interesting question. I think that I think that given everything that's happened over the last year, that the last year has kind of really made us aware of how unsafe people can feel. I think there have been lots of discussions, kind of far more open discussions than we've ever had before, or than I ever remember occurring, that have made us kind of really aware of just how unsafe people can feel. What makes people feel unsafe? I think it's, we know that, for example, in relation to race, the numbers, ethnic minorities are underrepresented in our profession. And I think that, feeling or being made to feel, whether that's deliberately or whether it's due to kind of carelessness or unconscious bias or out and out racism, kind of being made to feel, or sexism, being made to feel different is something that can make people feel unsafe. And just not having kind of adequate procedures in place to sort of steer people through the profession, to mentor people, all of these things can contribute to people feeling unsafe. And what do I mean by feeling unsafe? I think that the toll of any kind of discrimination can be one where people can suffer a deterioration in mental health, you know, whether that's kind of anxiety or depression or kind of more serious issues. I think people's confidence can suffer, and you know, ultimately workplaces and education spaces should be safe ones. They should be nurturing spaces. So yeah, that's my response.
Harriet,
So,
I saw you nodding away there. You have something to add?
Well, because I was actually particularly nodding along to Sarah, because I've already bored people before we started that I was listening to Marsha and Sarah a podcast of another discussion they had, the Negroni Talk series earlier in the year, and that was just after Harry and Meghan had given their interview with Oprah, and after sadly Sarah Everard had been kidnapped and killed, and it underlined the lack of safety that still persists. And it is essential that I agree with Sarah that workplaces ensure that they are safe places for all of their employees, because of all the reasons that have just been stated. If it isn't a safe place, particularly if it isn't a psychologically safe place, or a place where you feel that you can be yourself, put simply, then you're quite simply not going to be at your happiest and most productive. You're not going to. It's not going to be enjoyable. It's a failure for everyone. And I think that that's an area that all practices of all sizes can really work on to make their workspaces as safe and as nurturing as possible.
And Melanie, you made the point about education and awareness being really quite fundamental to creating this culture of inclusion. So how does education feed into that idea of safety, do you think?
Well, I think the idea behind education is fundamentally one, I think that starts with awareness. I think, as you mentioned earlier, you know, that the reality is we think of our profession as a very well educated cohort, but the subtleties of race and the matters surrounding that are, I think, are very hard to appreciate if you haven't had the need to give it thought. And I think, you know, some of the conversations we've had, we've encountered some surprising comments as well. And I think by educating, you're not going to solve the problem on its own, but at least you're starting to make people conscious of perhaps some of the matters they haven't thought about before. And I think by starting that consciousness and awareness, you can then start to have better discussions and more open discussions. And I think that's where we're trying to go with this, to be able to have a more open platform where people have the right language to be able to have conversations that hopefully start to create that culture of understanding. And then we can start to debate how we're actually going to make a change. But I think you can't have those discussions or make decisions about what to do next unless you are starting from the point of, you know, a common understanding of matters.
Thank you. And Chris, you talked about this sense of family in your organisation. That would suggest some kind of psychological safety there, but is that the reality?
I think it is. I mean, I was just reflecting on something that's happened to us sort of relatively recently, where one of our architects running a large project has contracted COVID and got extremely ill, and her mental health suffered as a result. You know, the COVID passed quickly, but left a legacy. And that architect, we've just sent her home. We said, come back when you feel better, and we've kept her on full salary. That's a big cost to us, many, many thousands every month. But that has, of course, rippled around the entire practice, that the family reached out to that person in her hour of need. We've treated her more than fairly. We've looked after her, and we've just given her the time and space to recover. And I remember it doesn't happen every month. There was another case last year. We had an architect got leukemia, and again we looked after her until she was recovered. And these things they matter a lot if you take this if you don't take such a hard-hearted sort of business-like approach to situations like that, which are always going to come up regularly in a large practice. We do lots of things. We have once a month, we have a breakfast in the studio where everybody comes in, and we just talk openly about how things are going in our personal life and in our work life around the sort of relaxed context of a breakfast. COVID, we've managed to do this online, actually on Zoom, which is challenging, but our studio reopens next month, and that's our first priority, is to get those going again. HR as well, we have a super HR director who has the personality of a sort of loving, kindly aunt, if I can put it that way, who gives a metaphorical hug to people when they need it, but at the same time is very fair and consistent when that's needed to be. So it's multiple approaches. We try, as a family, not everybody always gets on with everybody at the same time. That happens in families, and of course it happens in a studio of 70 or 80 people. And we have ways of sort of dealing with that gently and sensitively to try and avoid things like that escalating when those sort of situations do come up. We try to employ people that are like-minded, that get on well. It's important to us that we have a sort of culture that's not aggressive. We call it the sort of darling value, which is about consideration to each other. And it's one of the things when we're interviewing, we're looking for people that we think that have those sort of attributes as people, more than just their architectural ability, that they'll fit into our family and share those values, really. That's important to us. We lead by example. Our directors work in the studio. We don't have our little separate offices. We just sit at workstations in the middle of the studio, just like anyone else. I think that's important. Ultimately, we're trying to give everybody a sort of happy and satisfying career, because you spend so much of your life in the office, whatever it is, 8-9 hours a day. So it's a significant chunk of your life. And we want to make that experience pleasant, enjoyable, fun, and that colours sort of almost everything that we do in our approach.
And Mohammed, you talked about the organic nature that you're trying to address this issue with. So, what does that mean to be organic? What does that look like?
I think for us, and certainly for myself, it's very important. It's not a tick box exercise, that you're not doing it just for PR or business development by changing your logos or putting up people on your website just for if it's the kind of flavour of the month. I mean, the way SGP are doing it, I mean, we're 51 years old, so we've got our kind of top tier are very much kind of baby boomers generation. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to approach the generation X, Ys, and Zs using different platforms, of social media. We've got a podcast, we've got a YouTube channel, internally and external mentoring groups. So we're talking to youngsters at different universities, looking at apprenticeship, trying to speak to them in the best way that they can kind of teach us, and we can reflect from their experience as well. And then just to kind of echo some points about awareness and being conscious, I think that is very important, but also promoting good culture, promoting transparency, and having that open door policy that the professionals can come and talk to you about challenging issues and sensitive topics. And from that, we've created SGPID, which is a diversity and inclusive group that meets once a month. And, it gives us an opportunity there to address, issues or areas which you would actually feel quite uncomfortable to talk to your line manager about. And, a couple other things that we're doing is that, you see a lot of practices doing thought leadership on design, sustainability. We're trying to push thought leadership on diversity and inclusiveness. And, also look at it from a sector by sector basis as well, because there's different challenges in different sectors. So I come from an industrial data center sector, which is very kind of engineered, male driven. And we feel as architects a minority there. So, already we're, challenging that architects are very important in our sector. But then it's educating the youngsters as well and talking to them about how important our sector is and, how we can relate to them because they're using, technology more and more every day. So yeah, I think these are a few of the strategies that we're looking at.
And it's really interesting. A number of you talked about consciousness and sort of making conscious the unconscious. And we've had a question, how are you trying to eradicate unconscious bias in the workplace and with industry? And if so, how? I'm going to reframe that question slightly and ask, how do you think unconscious bias manifests itself? And do feel free to chip in on off the back of other people's answers. But Harriet, if I could start with you, how do you think unconscious bias manifests itself in the workplace, and what can we do about it if you've got any?
How has it manifested itself? It's interesting hearing Chris and Mohammed talk about the different approaches. And Sarah and I had a quick chat about it last week, that I felt that that DCA had gone through a period where there was a habitual hiring of like-minded people, unintentionally, and that we had built a practice that was quite one-dimensional in terms of our employee base. It was heavily male, white, and so our task is then to try and undo that bias, and I know that others on this call have already said it, but certainly get help, in terms of how you recruit. So both internally, we've got a great head of people, Amy, who's on the call, and also have worked with external partners to look at particularly how you can put in anti-bias training for recruitment. Marsha, I know you and I have mentioned it before. I don't think you can eradicate bias. It exists in sort of all walks of life, not just in the workplace. But you must be aware of it and try and counter that and be mindful of how bias might manifest itself. So we try and have diverse recruitment panels. We try and use objective ways of assessing candidates. We are experimenting with removing sort of names and other metrics from CVs, and all of these are sort of small moves that we can try, particularly in the recruitment process, to remove bias and try not have a sort of DCA model of who we want to employ, but just instead have a diverse group of thinkers who can all work together.
So if I may, I just want to pick up on that point because it somewhat contradicts Chris's approach, which is around getting like-minded people who fit in. Would you urge against that approach then?
Me, yeah, wholeheartedly. I'm not saying Chris is necessarily in the wrong, but we have taken a direct, conscious approach that's not how we want to try and recruit at DCA, and not how we don't see that as the best route for the profession.
You can have like-minded people from a multitude of cultural backgrounds. That's not the definition of it. But an organisation to prosper needs a bit of sort of unanimity in terms of people's aspirations and so on. That that need to be shared, but nothing to do with a cultural background. But people are people wherever they come from.
I think there's a lot of studies that are coming out at the moment. I think McKinsey did a big one, studying various organizations. And what's interesting is the data coming out, just as we've seen with, gender. There's a lot of gender data that's come out. The diversity data is now coming out and showing that, diverse boards, diverse teams are performing better than not diverse teams. And that's not just in terms of creativity or productivity, but economically as businesses as well. So it's really interesting. And but I think also it's worth acknowledging that there's safety, actually, to pick up on that point of hiring something you recognize. That's human instinct in a way. And this is part of the challenge we have, is that it's almost fighting the grain a little bit to reach out to something different to yourself. And I think, that the landscape is changing and questions are being asked. I mean, just as an example, positive change. I was in a demolition contractors meeting the other day, and the question was asked from the interviewing, so the client side, what their EDI policy was. And because I think in terms of the architectural practice, that's one thing, and I hope a lot of the practices these days are improving and consciously changing, but actually the wider industry is a long way to go. If you go on to building site, it's a different world entirely from working in practice.
Mohammed, you put your hand up there. You want to say something back?
Yeah, I think for myself, like you just what kind of Harriet mentioned about the recruitment process, where you omit the name. I mean, we tend to do that as well, and we omit also the photographs, because a lot of TVs have photographs as well. I think the difficulty that we find is that once the professional comes in, is how do you retain good talent? So you have to kind of look at culture, but I think it's very important to have that transparency and also have all levels of professionals involved in some sort of the management side as well. So, I mean, that's something that we tend to do at SGP. So we create these SGP mentor champions. So you don't have to be a partner or a director to be a mentor. We've got part ones and part twos that are the go-to person. It gets them more involved, and it makes them feel appreciated as well. So that's something that we're kind of doing. So,
Sarah, you yourself, you've thought quite a bit about this sort of sense of safety and the fact that people coming in. You talked about the education and all sort of stages. So when it comes to that recruitment stage, and someone has asked us the question about, how do we, post jobs to encourage applications from all backgrounds? Is that a way of encouraging diversity, in your opinion?
So what do you mean by posting jobs that are kind of deliberately
targeting different groups? Yeah,
I'm not sure about that, actually. I'm not sure how you would craft the language to. I mean, I can see that you can craft language so that it excludes particular groups. I'm not sure how you would flip that. But what I would say, just thinking about the interview and thinking about this idea of people who fit or don't fit, I think that that maybe what's required on the part of employers and people who do the recruiting is actually a willingness to make themselves feel uncomfortable, actually a willingness to go beyond their own kind of cultural comfort zones. So I think it was Dominic Cummings that first talked about, well, he wasn't the first person to talk about it, but kind of famously talked about this idea of diversity of thought. And he used it as a way of arguing that we don't need cultural diversity, that what we require is diversity of thought. And I would say that obviously we need both. And the two things don't necessarily map onto each other, but we need both. And I think in order to do that, in order to have diverse teams, the people creating the teams have to be willing to go beyond what they know and what is familiar to them. And I think that this is the kind of nub of it. It's being willing to go, you know, just beyond what you understand, and that is, you know, there's a kind of, I mean that in a qualitative sense, but also in a kind of very, in almost a quantitative sense. When we think about architecture graduates, there's this idea that certain schools are good, and that if students have gone to certain schools, then they're good. But, you know, we need to look beyond that, because extremely talented students might be kind of hiding in schools that one wouldn't normally consider. And I think it was Diane that talked about, you know, that said in our previous warm-up chat, it was Diane that talked about the fact that practices should be going to schools that have a diverse cohort. So, you know, it's because the thing about kind of crafting an advert to pull people in is that you're still, I think we need to do more work, kind of more active.
Danger of falling onto stereotypes, perhaps.
I think so. I think so. Because how would you encapsulate that? It's like kind of dumbing down, and, you know, like you know, I don't know, defaulting to rap because you're trying to get, like, you know, trying to thinking about not within the context of architecture, but maybe this is more something that might happen in the kind of media world, that you start kind of defaulting to a language that you think you know, a particular cohort might understand. And there are so many kind of, as you say, stereotypes and kind of pitfalls in making those assumptions. I think we need to be more active and actually kind of go and find people.
There's a sense that just because you're gay, you're not going to look in pink news for a job, basically.
Well, exactly, you know, and you know, because I'm black, it doesn't necessarily mean that I like rap or, you know, whatever. Although, you know, at times I do, but, you know.
It's okay. No judgment here. Melanie.
Hi. I think it was just picking up the point about how you define it, or what one can write. I think it was John Amato who gave the talk as part of the last event series, who sort of raised the question about the criteria in which you're setting for applications, and is there an opportunity for us to think about redefining talent and kind of what is important? Is it the CAD programs or the school they went to, or is it about an attitude and experience or past performance and motivation and the sort of character, as opposed to, you know, box ticking in terms of school and programs? Tricky, but interesting one to ponder, how one defines that, or could redefine it.
Harriet.
I've said this before, so I don't want to seem like it's the be all and end all, but something that we've reflected on, I think, is also our employee brand. You know, rather than having a targeted advert, I think you need to look at, are you an employer in choice, and are you a safe place to go and work? And Chris's practice has won numerous awards for being an employer of choice, so he's obviously doing a lot right there. Actually, the same BFA decolonized architecture event that I mentioned, Tara Balade mentioned that when she's mentoring others, she advocates for looking at a practice's website, and if it isn't diverse, just don't apply. And it's one voice, but an interesting thing to hear. You know, in my position as an employer, to hear that opinion, you realise that actually you've got to put the work in to make sure that you are seen as a safe place, because otherwise, forget it. You can write all the adverts in the world, you know, carefully crafted with all any sort of wording, but if you don't seem like a safe place and include, which is the fundamental underlying part of inclusion, right? You know, you need to, I want to go there because I think I'm going to have a good time there. And so I think that there is, I think there's work for all practices to do, and I know I'm doing it. All of our photos, because they're out of date, is, you know, we've got middle-aged white guys, and I know that isn't a true representation of the practice. So we've got, you know, there's just the sort of admin to do, like retake everybody's photos and update the website and all the rest of it. But it's all important. It all makes a difference, and we should do it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Chris, to follow, if you can follow up on that, but also want to ask you, the couple of questions have come in. How can directors be convinced this is beneficial to them and their studios? Why I say this, I assume they mean diversity and inclusion. And the second question, how involved do you think directors should be in leading the change within the office? So if you could tie that into your answer with responding to Harriet.
I can not only speak from my own experience, but I do talk to my colleagues who run other practices. We do meet from time to time. Architecture, in an architectural practice, our only asset is our people. We don't have property or mechanical assets. It's all about the people, and the practice will only prosper if the people are happy, motivated, safe, and love their job. That will make a successful practice and a profitable practice. And we know that, and it underpins our entire approach to the people that work with us. So that's the sort of main point. It's interesting, changes over the years. You know, 5 years ago, before the Brexit referendum, we did a tot-up. We had 25 different nationalities in the practice, and we absolutely loved it. That diversity, that range of backgrounds of people coming from, whether it's Spain, west coast of Africa, Asia, South America. I'm thinking of individuals in the practice right now. Having that sort of melting pot of it makes such a net addition to our creativity that the different backgrounds all add up to different approaches and fresh thinking and so on. So we don't need to be convinced as leaders. We already know it. It's actually how you achieve it. You know, to increase the diversity is not easy, and there are many rocks in our path, and some of those rocks can be sort of knocked away, but not all of them. You know, it's not as easy as it may seem, to be honest. Just in the way that society is structured and so on. Picking up graduates, you know, I love that idea of focusing more on the universities that have a higher proportion of students from more diverse backgrounds. I think is a great one. But of course, recruiting Part 2 and 3 students is only a part of our recruitment. Most of our recruitment is replacing experienced architects who have either gone on maternity leave or have moved on. So that doesn't solve everything, but definitely it's part of it. And I think this problem will be solved by looking at multiple measures. There's not the magic bullet. It's a sort of hackneyed phrase, but it will be doing 5, 6, 10 different things that, you know, that will all add together as society itself pivots towards this. You see, you know, role models like Lewis Hamilton, like Raheem Sterling and so on. I think they're really changing people's opinion, and it's incalculable the good that these guys are doing, and women as well.
Melanie, you wanted to respond to that?
Yeah, just to add to it, I think in terms of trying to tackle the leadership in a practice, if you're tackling it maybe not from the leadership group itself, I think speaking from experience, and she's on the call, Fran, you do have to be a bit brave and start the conversation, and that's exactly what happened at our practice. And although there's been initiatives happening for over 20 years, the landscape is changing, and I think like any CPD topic, it's something that takes continuous learning and attention to keep on top of the world as it's changing, and we're all learning. But actually to be brave and start a conversation is really important. I think to find an ally that you can also tap into the leadership team with is really important. And as Harriet mentioned, you know, don't be afraid to seek help from outside the practice, because there's some amazing people out there like Diane who can offer insight and training for leadership teams, which we're looking to do ourselves with Diane. That will help that conversation. And I think in understanding that clients are starting to ask the questions about what practices and their consultant teams are doing, and therefore I think it's evolving, but it's shifting. And I've heard of a number of procurements recently where clients have actually asked contractors to demonstrate that their supply chain has EDI policies in place. Now that is an incredible ask if you know the construction industry. And I think the more that happens, and the more leadership teams are aware that that's, you know, coming, not in all sectors, but you know, hopefully one day. But that landscape's changing, and we all need to be able to demonstrate good practice and policy is a nice way to encourage it.
Harriet, you put your hand up, but also this word in the question: how can directors be convinced it's beneficial to them and their studios?
It shouldn't be the be all and end all, but money usually is a good hook. And as Melanie's already said, there's plenty of reports, particularly this McKinsey report, which highlights that diverse teams are more profitable. And there's also the more sort of immediate end of that clients are asking architectural practices what their EDI policies are, what they're doing, and practices will stop winning work if they can't demonstrate that they're committed to meaningful change within the industry. And I would have thought that even the most resistant of directors, if there are any, would be convinced by an economic argument when they're running a practice.
I mean, it's an interesting point.
Shouldn't be necessary, but
yeah,
it's
an interesting point about economics, really, and I'm really curious to hear, you know, Sarah's and Mohammed's thoughts on this. That isn't there something dehumanizing about the fact that money is the only motivator to do the right moral thing? Mohammed?
I just wanted to echo Chris's point. You know, our only assets are our people, which I'm a strong believer in that as well. I think we should be looking at them as people and not just a production tool, someone that's, you know, creating drawings and turning out packages. So I think once we start building that relation with our staff and you know, sitting down and talking to them, I think that's the baby steps we can take. I mean, as a director, I'm convinced. I think we should be sitting down with our future leaders, because they are the directors and the partners of tomorrow. I think that's very important, is to sit down with them and, you know, get the universities involved and get different levels of the practice involved as well, you know, whether it's part ones or part twos, direct architects, and just kind of be more transparent and share that knowledge. I think it only takes one person to put their head above the parapet to make the point. I mean, how much did we talk about well-being before the pandemic? It was something that never used to get talked about that much, but once everyone's working from home and doing 70-hour shifts and struggling with the work-life balance, it's a hot topic. So I think, you know, this kind of COVID pandemic has been a blessing, because it's got us to talk about issues which we weren't talking about. And I think we need to continue that once we get back, hopefully, into the office as well. So.
First time
that's happened. So yeah, just to pick up, I think you're right, Marsha. I think it is dehumanizing. I totally, you know, I agree. I've seen the statistics from that McKinsey report, and so yeah, you'd think that practice directors would think it's a no-brainer. I'm also very aware, and I mean, to a certain degree, kind of heartened by the changes that are happening in procurement, so that you know, EDI is becoming you know, it's becoming a kind of part of the procurement process. It's becoming something that people have to address and have to show that they are actively addressing within their practice. I think these are good things, but I think that ultimately, you know, we want people to, you know, we want people to want to have diverse practices, you know, and I think that I think it has to go beyond money, and I think we should think about, or something to think about might be a kind of cultural and social capital, the kind of the other things that diversity brings to a team and to a practice. And I think just picking up on something that I think it was Melanie that started talking about this idea of redefining culture and you know, how we define what's valuable. I think that this is something that we need to think about. I think that architectural education, and it's not just architectural education, it's all kind of sort of creative practice, you know, whether it be you know, fine art, graphics, the kind of performance cultures. There is a kind of hierarchy which places you know, a lot of value on kind of Western culture, and you know, you have this sort of cultural capital if you the kind of more you understand about these things. But people from diverse cultures have, you know, other things to bring to that kind of cultural table. And you know, think of it like a, I don't know, like a meal, I don't know, dodgy food metaphor, but you know, I want people to kind of think that this is something actually that might, you know, we might enjoy, that we might all benefit from on a human level, not just a financial one, you know, because as Chris said, we spend so much of our lives at work. And if you just I kind of go back to that thing of going beyond your comfort zone, because when we relate to people, we look for kind of signifiers that we're going to connect, whether it's that we take the same kind of holidays or, you know, eat the same food. But if you just kind of look a little beyond that, then you might learn and gain something. And I think that these are the kinds of structures and barriers that we need to break down, because actually that is what's at play, other than the kind of academic credentials, which I could talk, which would be good to kind of talk about, you know, why kind of, you know, one student might have these credentials over another. But beyond that, if you have two students that are identical in terms of their academic performance, or two practitioners to go beyond students, then we start looking at those small signifiers. And I mean, there's lots to say about that. We might get it wrong, you know, just because someone's brown doesn't mean that, I don't know, they don't go skiing, whatever it is. We might just get it wrong. But also, you know, what if they don't? There might be other interesting things about them that you would benefit from kind of engaging with. And, you know, this is what I'd like to see people thinking about, kind of beyond the economics.
Okay, well, we'll come back to some of those commonalities and ways in which people can sort of build bridges, if you like, shortly. But Harriet, your hand's up.
Just picking up on what Sarah said and what you've previously said, Marsha, it's not diversity of thinking, it's diversity of lived experience. And what I'm not an architect, but I think what's essential to also talk about is how that aids the design process. I have heard David in boardrooms at design reviews saying, we're cannibalizing our own flesh. If I see another one of my own buildings, you know, and that you need diversity of experience to have different views and different inputs, and to be and that is essential for a enjoyable, collaborative, fruitful design process. Purely as the observer, as I say, I'm not.
Well, it's really interesting you should say that, because we've got a question here. What are the best design moves to make to exemplify inclusivity in a workplace? Now, I think to some extent that question is talking about, you know, how can you create an inclusive space so that it feels inclusive? But perhaps also we can, you know, talk about, you know, what the benefits of inclusivity in design. Chris?
Yeah, that's an intriguing one. How would it translate into design? I think, again, it goes back to my personal experience. We've struggled through the pandemic because we've all been working from our kitchen tables in isolation. And it's why I'm so anxious to get everybody back into the studio as quickly as possible, Boris Johnson permitting. And it's this collaboration that's so important, where people sit next to each other, discuss their whatever particular issue they're facing on that particular morning collaboratively. That's absolutely at the heart of an architectural practice. It's you know, when I read in the press about some practices are never going back to the studio, I mean, my heart sank, really. We love being in our studio. We love the buzz of it, the energy, the fact that you randomly bump into people in the, we have what we call the family kitchen, which is at the heart of the studio, where it's a bit more than a water cooler kind of thing, but it's that idea magnified, where you know, where everybody meets and chats from whatever project or part of the practice they're working within. That's not answering the point about how, you know, the buildings we design, that's how they could sort of promote diversity or facilitate it. I'm struggling to get my head around that.
Do you think that those who have benefited from spending time working from home might feel pressurized in some practices to return, even though they're more productive from home? Is that even possible?
I can only say in our practice, you know, and we talk to everybody within it and consult. This is our experience. It's not been more productive. You know, we are collaborative. All our projects are teams, essentially. They're all larger projects, so very few people have a role in the practice where they're working individually. They're all, you know, part of groups. And it's not been our experience that it's productive either individually or collectively across the practice. Some people, you know, the ones who've suffered the most or struggled the most are those with young families, and you know, when there was lockdown, trying to do your job, and with young children running around needing to be managed full on. I mean, my heart goes out to those architects in our team who've really found it very difficult.
Sorry, Melanie, Sarah and Harriet have their hands up. If we start with Melanie.
Hi. Yeah, I might just try and answer a few bits from the conversation just there. I think in terms of designing space, I think the reality is that whether it's cultural differences or personality differences, we probably all will gravitate to different places, and completely agree that, you know, that the buzz, there's nothing like the buzz of the office. And, you know, what probably a lot of us has found is that collaborative space is so important. But I think the reality is you need to understand who you're designing for and allow for a range of spaces that will allow for people to not only do different tasks, but to feel mentally comfortable in, because different people will have different preferences. And I think we've equally, Chris, found, you know, especially with the larger teams, there, you know, you can have as many Teams calls as you want, but sitting around a table and you know, sketching through ideas and just speaking face to face, there's nothing like it. So we've actually used the opportunity to look at our office. And we are redesigning parts of it to kind of make more of the collaborative space. So if we're going to return, how are we going to return in a different way? That might be a hybrid, blended way of working. So maybe we might still have some elements of working from home. There are tasks, you know, writing, you know, a fee proposal or have lots to CAD through that might be best suited at home in quiet space, but actually a lot of what we do is about being together, and actually not just being together, but seeing what each other is doing and seeing the material samples on the next table, and yeah, having those chance encounters. But I think having a mix and a range of spaces and places and ways of working is the way of the future.
Sarah.
Hi, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. So I think I completely agree with Chris about the collaboration thing. Although, I mean, I work for me, so I'm not in a situation where I'm going to go back to a large studio. But that's just something about thinking about the difference between large and small practice. Actually, I think, you know, those kind of incidental meetings are really important, kind of around the coffee machine or whatever it is. So agree with that. On how we make design more, I can't remember exactly what the term was that you used, Marsha, but talking about kind of diversity and what that would look like. I think there are two aspects. One is just in terms of a kind of very sort of very kind of practical thing, you know, about sort of quality of spaces and so on. And I think that is about kind of referring to lots of lived experiences, and it's about the kind of co-design process. And, you know, there's lots of good stuff happening at the moment around that, I think. So I won't talk about that, because I think that lots of people are doing good work in that area. But I think somewhere where we might struggle is more kind of around aesthetics. I think that I thought that what Harriet said was really funny about kind of Chipperfield, David Chipperfield, even David.
Yeah, the main man.
Cannibalizing, you know, his own work. And it's just that idea of, you know, how much more modernism. I mean, you know, it was kind of great, but I think it was Rem Koolhaas that said something about architecture and architecture being too self-referential. And he may not have meant, he may not have been talking about aesthetics, but, you know, I think this is an issue. Architecture, you know, will not move forward if it doesn't kind of take references beyond itself, but also kind of beyond the Western canon. You know, modernism had its place, and you know, and still does, but we can, you know, I think we can learn from other cultures, and also I think in terms of collaboration, I think something that's really important in the studio, thinking about my own experience working within larger practices, I think actually is breaking hierarchies. You know, sometimes I think, you know, Barack Obama is really amazing when he talks about young people, because there is a recognition that people coming out of university, that young people just have fresh ideas, and it's the same around culture. You know, so maybe you've 20 years experience and you are brilliant at corner details, I don't know, and you can show me how to do a classical corner detail kind of ad infinitum, but maybe, you know, people who are lower down the food chain might just have some interesting ideas that with decent mentoring, you can help them refine, so that, you know, maybe it's a bit raw and you kind of think, well, you know, that wouldn't quite work, you know, this kid doesn't get blah blah, but with a bit of mentoring, you know, you can help people refine things and become better designers. So I think that we shouldn't always assume that you know, that those who are experienced necessarily always have, you know, have the best ideas. So
Harriet, you've got your hand up there.
No, yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think just back to your point, your question, Marsha, about whether or not people are being pressurised to come back into the office. I really hope not, because to Melanie's point about diversity of space and quality of space, your homes are another space, and even actually this platform is a third space, you know, and there is for some comfort in some of the anonymity of an online platform. Don't get me wrong, DCA, we are keen to get back into the office for all the reasons that have been said. You know, it is a collaborative space, but we also see that there are tasks that the staff would sometimes prefer to do at home. To Chris's point, yeah, it's a nightmare if, you know, we've had some staff who've really struggled with homeschooling and all the rest of it, and we've tried to support them as best we can, giving them, you know, time with the kids and stuff. But you also have the flip of that, that it's quite handy to be able to, as I did this evening, take an hour at 5:30, make the kids dinner, hang out with them before joining an event. That's something that we didn't have before, and it adds to that feeling of inclusion and safety. And to Sarah's point about design references, and again, I can't speak as an architect and designer, but we've really tried to engineer ways of getting people like to look up from their desk when we've all been at home and we've all been sort of bound in teams. So we've had a series of events and speakers, but also sort of coming together moments that we've called it DCA Symposium, but an annual event of stuff that isn't architecture, where we've asked for artists and food writers and journalists and other designers to come and just talk. And the way of designing it was that we were all in different, we couldn't all be in the same event, so then we had to come together and talk about that. And I think it's beholden on practices to find ways, when you've perhaps got your community a bit more spread out, to bring everyone together that isn't just a design review. It's actually sort of more just an idea of community. And I think Chris has spoken eloquently about that. It's really, I don't want people pushed back into the office. I think that would be a retrograde step, but I certainly want our staff to be coming into the office for all the right reasons, and that to share thought and ideas.
Mohammed, in terms of answering that question a little bit around inclusivity in the workspace, we've had a couple of questions here, which perhaps you can think about. It says, do you think many practices have provision for prayer rooms, and is it likely to be something to be addressed in the near future? And also, how do we deal with the culture of after work drinks and not feeling left out if you don't feel comfortable in that kind of setting, but don't want to miss out on spending time with colleagues that you want to build relationships with?
Yeah, I mean the first point question there. I've got first-hand experience with that, where a client asked us not for a prayer room but a contemplation room, where that's open to the end user to have a space for them to meditate or just kind of seclude themselves, and so they can have time to themselves. I promote that. I think that's a really, really good idea. But it shouldn't obviously be limited to one faith. It should be open to everyone. I myself, practice, and sometimes find it difficult in the office that you have to go away on a Friday for like 2 hours. Then your colleagues ask you, where have you gone? Why haven't you joined us for Friday lunch? So it can be quite difficult, but I think again it's having that awareness and just communicating and talking to them. It's not a difficult conversation, and come to the person and speak to them. We won't give you an aggressive reply back. It is quite a common thing we get asked. So yeah, I mean, I do encourage that. I think that's a really good idea if it comes from the client. And regarding the after work culture, I mean, not just for religious reasons. I know professionals that have families and children, and they can't stay late at social events. So myself, I tend to try my best to finish work at the right time, 5:30, 6, whatever it is, and so I can spend time with my little one and my family. So and I think days are gone where deals are done at these social events, like at these drinking events now. I think you just have to kind of see what the situation is and who your client is, because we've attended with clients some sports events. We've done some golfing. We've went to Premiership football matches. We've done kind of weekend events with mentoring and training with them as well. So I think it depends on the culture as well, and who your kind of staff and your client is as well. So, Chris.
Yeah, no, Mohammed, you have hit the nail on the head. It is difficult. We on a Friday we ring a bell at 4 o'clock and we have a free bar in our kitchen at work, which is pretty popular. But we also have a policy where our mothers our parents, generally work a 4-day week in the studios and then generally elect to have the Friday working from home. It's something we've always done long before COVID. And it is difficult. They miss that opportunity to be part of the sort of Friday night banter. And I haven't found an answer to it really. We've always gone away for a weekend once a year. We've been all around Europe where it's just the practice partners aren't allowed. And the whole point of it is for everybody to get to know people that they don't normally interact with day to day. And that's something didn't happen last year because of COVID, but we're talking now about where we might go this year. It's always been a really important event for us. I like the DCA idea of the symposium. That sounds very interesting, quite fun. Thank you.
Harriet, then Melanie, and I'll also want to say to our audience, if you have a question you'd like to put to the panel or you want to contribute to the discussion, we'd be happy to have you put your hand up, and I'll invite you in. We've just lost Melanie. Harriet, go for it.
Mine's super quick. Chris, we have a core day, so we've got flexi work time and core hours and usual thing that people make up their time, but we have a core day, so all of our part-time workers, everybody works on a Wednesday, so we try and then fix whether it be speaking events or staff breakfasts, those sorts of stuff. We try and anchor those to the core day to get as to try and have everybody involved. And the pub thing, DCA also, we like a party, but just don't have it as the be all and end all. We have plenty of other things that we enjoy which aren't centered around the pub, and I'd encourage everyone to do the same. Yep.
Poor Melanie keeps them coming and going.
Sorry, yeah, my videos just had that.
Oh, you are there. Sorry, I do apologise. Yeah, go, Melanie.
Yeah, I just add something really quick. Yeah, I think I'd encourage your practice to just keep a diversity of events, excuse the word, but we do things like breakfasts on Fridays and lunchtime softball. I think it's trying to make sure there's a mix of events so that different people can join at different times, because we've all got our own commitments, and drinking on the Fridays is lovely for sometimes, but conscious it's not for everyone. So yeah, just encourage the mix.
We've had a question here. Some companies are only interested in ticking boxes regarding inclusivity and diversity, but statistically speaking, not so. How to encourage a real drive in inclusivity in the workplace, especially in smaller cities where diversity is rare? I mean, I might question the fact that diversity of people is rare in a smaller city. Perhaps there might be less visible diversity, but that's not to say that invisible diversity is rare. But might it be a tick box exercise for some companies, and how do you mitigate that approach, Mohammed?
I mean, I hope it's not a tick box exercise. I just think, again, it goes back to, education and having these internal talks with everyone involved, right from the top to the bottom, and just make sure that we are transparent. I mean, as architects, and we have all got experience during our university life where we're doing presentations and we're critiqued on every single box or line we draw. So every action we do, every post we do on social media, we should be conscious on why we're doing what we're doing, not just for the sake of it. So I'd encourage that we're more conscious on why we're doing what we're doing.
And how do you know that whether or not, say, for example, a person looking at a company, they've done all the website bits and pieces, they've got a diversity of people on their website, who may or may not work there, in terms of stock images, maybe. How do you know that it's going to be that safe space to try to enter? Is there anything that practices can do, Harriet, do you think?
That's a really good question. because it's one that I haven't thought of. But yes, there is one thing that we've been talking about doing, and we haven't because of COVID. It's sort of practically not possible at the moment. Is whether or not we can partner with a university to have a strong and diverse again level of engagement, where some students might be coming in for mentorship, or other students might be coming in for work experience, or others might be coming and doing their part one placement. And one idea that we're exploring is whether or not we can give over desk space. So for students who have perhaps don't have the quality of space either at uni or at home or whatever that might be, and they don't have space to, leave a model up, or that we can offer space, and alongside it some professional help, be that mentorship, or be that CV workshop with Amy, or some CAD support with our BIM managers, or design reviews with the architects. And I think that if we can get something like that off the ground, which I hope we can, you start building an alumni network effectively with your practice, and you would hope that gives a reputation as a safe place that isn't just, as you said, Marsha, pictures on websites, or lines put on Instagram.
And Sarah, because this is a subject quite close to your heart, I think, around that education piece. I mean, I heard forgive me if I'm repeating myself here, I heard a really great phrase about the pipelines into organisations or into sectors, which is that if the pipeline's leaking or there's something wrong with it, you don't blame the water. You either fix the pipeline or design a new one. And that very much seems to be one of the issues in architecture at the moment, around the pipeline into the profession. And you, Sarah, share your thoughts on the issues with the current pipeline.
I will. But can I firstly say something about small cities? I think.
Oh yeah, do.
This is a big big misconception, I think. Well, okay, London is 45%, like non-white, but there is diversity in small towns. Speaking from my own lived experience, my father grew up in a small town. I don't think he's like the only one. He grew up in Salisbury, I don't think that's so unusual. But it's a misconception that kind of irritates me slightly. It's one of those stereotypes. But the pipeline, I think another misconception here is that kind of Black and brown people from ethnic minority backgrounds aren't starting out in degrees, in architecture degrees, and actually people from ethnic minority backgrounds are overrepresented at that stage. So people are coming in fact, there's kind of double, something like 7% Black students at part one, which is kind of, double the number of Black people in the population. So there isn't a kind of an issue with recruitment at that point. So I often hear people say, well, we need to go into schools and we need to kind of tell them about architecture. I'm not saying, that we shouldn't, but I think we should be, there are different things we need to be doing in schools. But the pipeline may well be leaking, and we know that it leaks quite heavily around the part two stage, or kind of between parts 2 and 3. Harriet was talking about this in our kind of warm-up chat, and the drop-off is actually phenomenal. It goes from something like 5.5% down to 1.5 in terms of Black architects, and it's similar around other ethnic minorities, though maybe not as stark. And I think that this is a kind of fundamental issue with our profession and that bit of education. I think there are lots of things that happen. I think that that some students might struggle to get the quality of work experience that they need. And this goes back to recruiting and, whether or not they can find their way into those kind of smaller, sort of more niche practices that you might need a network to get into, as opposed to the big practices that are hoovering people up through recruitment consultancies. I have nothing against recruitment consultants. I got my kind of first jobs this way, but it's not the way that you get kind of really good Part 3 experience. And then paying conditions in the industry. This goes beyond racial diversity. That our industry has a culture of overwork, underpayment. It's a conversation that I have sometimes with friends who work in other industries, and they are kind of truly shocked by how little architects are paid. And this is a bigger problem, not one that we can kind of solve in this discussion, because this has to do with fee structures and so on. But I think something that we can think about is the culture within the workplace. And I think that we start hemorrhaging people in between parts 2 and 3, partly because work conditions are inadequate. I can say more about education.
Yeah, Harriet's got her hand up, so
in.
yeah, let's hear from Harriet.
No, only a small point, because as we said, we discussed it in the warm-up, as Sarah said, but I think Melanie made the point that I spoke to Andrew Clancy at Kingston, and he was saying that one of the things that they've noticed, because there is this stark drop-off between Part 2, Part 3, and then full qualification, and that you're already in practice. And he was saying that the research that Kingston had done was that it was around availability of opportunity, that if you have studied in, I don't know, Newcastle, I don't know, my ignorance, I don't know if Newcastle offers an architecture degree, but if you have then had some work experience on the local high street, that is not the same experience than if you've managed to do your Part 1 with David Chipperfield. So we need to recognise that there is a difference in experience there. And as Melanie said, if then in the recruitment process you're looking for different things, you're not looking for particular software experience or which uni you've been to, or even comparing high street experience, where in all likelihood you may have had quite a high level of responsibility compared with other placements. We try and give our Part 1s a lot of exposure to work, but I don't know whether that's universal. So you want to make sure that your recruitment process is allowing for different routes into the profession. And I think if we don't do that, we won't fix this drop-off rate.
Melanie.
Hi, thank you. Just a very quick one to add. We've been in conversation with the LSA. It started 8 years ago, and the LSA, I think, is pioneering a new model for education, which combines working and practice. And so every student is paired with a practice, and the course is run consciously to allow them to work, to be paid for that work, making both the introduction into practice and the financial viability. It's not perfect, but it's definitely more accessible than the standard model. And I think it'd be interesting if more places were able to offer that scenario and that option for students, because equally education and practice are two very different things, and it makes it that much harder for students without a direct inroad or without the right university to get in. So I think it's a really interesting one to look into in terms of just opening those opportunities.
Sarah, and then we have a question in the chat.
And actually, I'm jumping the gun slightly because I read that question, and
shall I share the question?
Please do. Yeah.
So we have so it's Cara Canberk, and the question is: I'm currently a Part 2 student from LSBU, and Mohammed has been my mentor for over a year. Well done, Mohammed. I wanted to ask a question for everyone. Being from a family which has no education and hasn't worked in a professional environment, I can see naturally I'm a few steps behind in knowledge and literature. What can we do as a community to help issues similar to this, not only for cultural background, but also for environmental? Such a good question. Yeah, Sarah, go.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question. And so when I said that there are other things we can be doing in schools, I think this is what I was thinking about kind of in schools and university. And when we talk about cultural capital, this is one of the things that we are talking about. And I was thinking about this kind of this afternoon, just thinking about this talk and thinking that this was something I wanted to talk about, but that I wasn't kind of sure in what terms I could talk about it without kind of without stereotyping or without kind of offending people. So I teach first years, and this is something I noticed. So you know, some students will come in with a huge amount of cultural capital, and you just know that they've come from a family and a background where they have had exposure to literature, and this is beyond architecture. So you know, they're used to going to art galleries. They're used to you know, they've just had a lot of cultural exposure. And if we are honest in architectural education and also in recruitment, this stuff carries a lot of weight. When a student talks about you know, I sometimes have conversations with young women of color, and I hate that expression, but you know, I sometimes have conversations where people will say, well, you know, this person you know, kind of had drawn hardly anything, but he just stood there and waffled and he got a first for this project, and I slogged my guts out, you know, and you know, this is the mark I got, and this is what's at play often in that scenario, and it doesn't just affect people in education, it affects people in the workplace. You know, it affects the kind of practices that people get hired by, because it's you know, it's these very subtle things. You know, it's kind of being able to talk about this stuff. So that's kind of stating the issue as I see it. I think that we need to tackle what we think of as valuable in terms of culture. So you know, it should be equally valuable to talk about you know, I don't know, I'm going to talk about West Africa because it jumps to mind, just for want of, but you know, it should be kind of equally valid to be able to talk about the Benin bronzes as, you know, as to be able to talk about kind of ancient, you know, the ancient Greek world, which I find both equally fascinating. But not everybody has kind of equal access to this, and I think that this is what we need to be doing in schools, actually. That you know, whether it's kind of starting clubs or whatever it is, where you kind of, you know, just find people that are interested and sort of take them along to things. Sorry, I'm really passionate about this, but I had a.
But Sarah, do you think, just to sort of question you a little bit there, is that, yeah, you know, those clubs or things that would happen in schools, are they not then prescribing, you know, this is what art and culture is, and so you're leading them down a certain path? Or is that an access point? So you're saying to those who maybe haven't grown up appreciating, you know, art and culture as perceived within our universities, is that what, are we there teaching them that?
But no, but this is it. It's about attacking. So okay, maybe clubs aren't the right answer, and I'm going to roll back on that slightly, because I'm thinking about that horrible diversity report that talked about the school day so that we can give kids this. I'm not talking about that, definitely not, big disclaimer. I think well, I do think that we need to attack, you know, the idea, not attack, but we need to rethink the idea of, you know, which culture is valuable, because, you know, one can talk kind of, you know, eruditely about culture, you know, whatever it is, it just happens that, you know, the kind of dominant culture, you know, we live in a Western society, and this is the kind of, you know, these are the dominant cultural references. I think that people need exposure to culture from a very kind of young age, and need to learn how to talk about it and read about it, and and if they haven't had that, then it is about kind of helping people access it, and that isn't prescribing what that should be. I'm not kind of placing more or less value on particular kinds of culture, but I think I think it is important. I don't know if I've expressed
Chris,
right.
yeah, you have. Yeah, I mean, I want to ask Chris about this only because, it's in your position in your firm, that is there a sense that you do have this expectation that students and people coming into the profession have this lexicon around art and culture?
It might be unconscious. Sorry to there, Chris.
Are you aware of this, Chris?
I'm not really. I mean, we're looking for people with an enthusiasm for architecture. I think that's key to it, and that's really what we're trying to elicit from them. That they're passionate about architecture, and by the time they're coming to us, some I suppose have had 3 years, and some have had 5 years. One would have thought that if they've done that amount of time at university, that they would at least have that, and that is probably our most important thing at interview. Sort of rewinding a few moments as well, I actually try and encourage people, these part ones, to actually do their work experience in a small practice, rather necessarily than coming to us, where they may end up, I'm afraid to say, doing door details. They'll have the benefit of working on interesting, very large-scale projects, but it's probably not the best thing for their career. I started in a small practice. I first started working when I was 15 in the holidays in a small practice in Edinburgh, and it was such a great foundation for my career. So I would I try and do sort of, when my friends' kids are going to do architecture, I always recommend that's the route they take. And maybe, I am also worried about this break in the pipeline between part 2 and part 3, and why this is happening. And I don't understand it fully, but perhaps part of the answer is in trying to push people more towards small practices than big practices. In terms of the lack of a sort of cultural education, I guess it's probably true, and that kids coming from disadvantaged backgrounds that are outside our normal life, I can understand how that can happen, and I regret that, and we would do anything we can to try and reverse that or help with that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, from a personal point of view, it's something that I can deeply appreciate. I grew up with 2 West Indian parents, and my culture was West Indian, and so everything I knew about was about Trinidad and the Caribbean. And you get a sense that when someone talks to you about Wagner, and you're pronouncing it Wagner, that somehow that's some big failing. Mohammed, you had a thought about this drop off and why it's happening potentially.
Yeah, I think. Well, what I see is that, I mean, if you Google the hardest degree to qualify in, architecture is number 1. What I find is that because of the 7-year rigorous qualification, by part 2, it gets extremely tiring. I mean, I got my degree through APIS, and I can tell you the Scottish examination is a lot more rigorous than what the students are doing in the Southeast. We're locked in a room for 48 hours with 2 examination papers. So seeing that and knowing that that's something that you have to do can put you off that. And I mean, another thing is there's other areas that you can get into. I think BIM is now coming up in a big way, where a lot of part 2s don't want to get their part 3 because of they don't want to go through this the case study and the PDR. So they'll maybe want to become a technician. They'll try and strengthen their Revit skills and become a BIM manager or BIM coordinator. I mean, I see that they get paid more than architects, which is not right as well. So I'm seeing that's where maybe one of the reasons where there's a lot of dropouts as well. From my experience, when I spoke to my parents, I wanted to be an architect. I was 10 years old. I told them that, and the response I got was, "What is an architect?" So we should be kind of bringing this message about our, professionalism, our kind of our careers, not just to academic areas, but out to the wider society as well. That what we do for a living, and being part of this RIBA Future Architects mentoring program, I think is a really, really good idea, because it gets part ones into offices and they see first-hand practice experience, so they can make that decision at an early stage. I'm just finding that sometimes when they get to part two, it can be a bit too late, and it can be, a lot of wasted effort as well. So we could be kind of tackling it very early on the stage, but that's something that I've seen. So.
A reminder that if anybody listening in would like to ask a question of the panel, please feel free to put it in the chat, or indeed just raise your hand and you can join in. There is also another question here. It would be great to see the panel discussion on any strategies that can help include colleagues with intangibles. I think what they mean is invisible difference, like mental illness, well-being, rather than necessarily those with physical disabilities. And any thoughts on neurodivergent friendly spaces? And the architects amongst you. It comes back to that visible, invisible diversity, and indeed, how do we make our spaces as inclusive as they can be, especially for neurodivergent and those who might have hidden needs.
Happy to have a go, but yeah, not wanting to repeat what I've said before. I think that the reality of some of these conditions do operate on quite a wide spectrum, and so I think it's a hard one to place and a hard one to understand completely, because everybody's experiences are different. But only just to say that I think it takes sensitivity in terms of everything we do. It's about light, it's about acoustics, it's about touch, smell, and trying to have again a range of spaces. I've sort of said this in a different context before, but I think there are some similarities to a degree that needs that sensitive touch. But I think within a practice and people operating within a practice also needs I think the ability to have open conversations. And I think as a practice we have, as part of our policy, details in which we encourage people to speak in strict confidence, to understand any issues, and we will actively seek to accommodate and consciously make changes to help people, whether that's in the physical environment or equally in the tasks that people are being asked to do.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, we actually, it's done through an external provider, but we provide an anonymous phone line to a mental health specialist, which is available for anybody to do. And of course, we would never know what's said, but it's available to everybody in the practice for some of those kinds of issues. But in truth, all we know is how often it's used, and it's not used that much. I think it's 3 or 4 calls a year, or something of that measure. I think in terms of the sort of landscape of the practice, more literally bringing more greenery, more planting. People like to care for plants. It's a funny sort of psychological thing, but that's important. And we're trying to do as much of that at the moment, allowing them to personalize their space. I'm completely against hot desking. I hate the whole anonymity of it. They should have the desk. Some people are purists and it's absolutely immaculately clean. Others, like mine, are a mess. Others have got their photographs of their granny. I mean, these things are important. And back to the earlier point, you spend so much time at work, try and make it your space, and you have some ownership of your workstation. And also not pack people in too tightly. We try and give people a lot of space, and occasionally I visit other practices. I'm horrified at actually how they've squished people in. But yes, hope that answered that to a degree.
Yeah, thank you, Harriet.
Just to echo the points already made about the need for really consciously designed diversity of spaces in the workplace, and I'd also give a plug to Teams and Zoom and other platforms, because one thing that we found with lockdown is that it's been incredibly hard on more than we might have imagined in terms of the toll on their mental health, but there is some comfort in a bit of anonymity. So we've been using Teams to sort of poll staff, and great tool called Mentimeter, which we use in sort of staff calls to just sort of check in and check how everybody's feeling, and and get a kind of read of the room. And it's a really quick way to consult with your staff. And I think one of the sort of things that we've been talking about today is listening, asking and listening, and sometimes people don't have the confidence to talk, and it's a good tool just to sort of rely on. We've also got mental health first aiders, and I think that's a good investment that companies can make. And as Chris says, employee assistance programs and a good benefits package can be invaluable as well.
Sarah.
Second time. Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. And I think it does come back to this thing of safety. Speaking, I suppose I can't speak in terms of statistics or data. I can only speak from kind of personal experience. But I discovered kind of quite late in life that I'm probably dyslexic or dyspraxic. Depends which assessment you look at. But so I kind of made my way through secondary education, 2 degrees, and discovered later doing something completely different that I'm probably have this. But what I would say is that safe spaces, kind of quiet spaces. What I think Harriet was talking about, kind of thinking about the design of the office, because an open plan office actually isn't always the kind of safest environment for people. And I think there's something about, that this time, where people are able to work from home, if they are lucky enough to have kind of, decent space. I think that for some people, this environment is, they're probably able to be more productive in this environment. So I think it's really thinking about the quality of space, and then also creating, what Harriet's practice does sounds great, this idea that you sort of check in with people. But then also, as kind of Melanie was saying, I think practices need to, take this very seriously and try to understand very specifically what people's strengths are and what they might need support with. And I think that, it probably needs a lot of work. I'm not an expert, but it's just something I've been able to kind of reflect on. I used to work in large practices, and at points, that was maybe quite difficult. I work for myself now, so I can set the terms a lot, and I know myself a lot better. Not that big practice was fine, and that's not why I left. But it's just to say that, yeah.
No. So, yeah, I just want to get some sort of final thoughts from you all about coming back to the question, the theme of the evening, caring about an inclusive workplace culture, and reflecting on what each other has said. Is there anything that you can do, will do differently, reflect on more as you go back to your own workplace culture to ensure inclusivity? Mohammed. Sorry to throw you in there.
Not noted. Yeah, I think for me, well-being, diversity, inclusiveness need to be embedded in our DNA, just like architecture. We need to care and listen to our staff, whether that's through workshops, breakfast, groups. Just make sure we're accommodating everyone's needs. And just to kind of echo what everyone said, really, really great points. And I think we can all kind of learn from each other and kind of take these baby steps forward. So I think, yeah.
Melanie. Oh, we can't hear you, Melanie. There you go, you're muted. There we go. Oh, there you go. You're here. You're with us.
Turn off my video, which I think is in weird editing. Anyways, I think there's a lot of great conversations going on at the moment, and I do need to give a shout out to the Architecture Race Forum, which is part of the reason why I'm here and have gained a lot of knowledge. There's some amazing people and amazing initiatives that are there, and if anyone wants to look at their LinkedIn page, there's a great resource that has been assembled together by part of the group. But I think at the end of the day, we're, at ORMS, we're interested in growing an informed and sensitive and innovative culture. And I think part of that is being able to respond sensitively and creatively in everything we do, for the benefit, number one, of our people and the people we're designing for the places we're designing for, and the planet. And we need to do that consciously, and I think by continuing to educate ourselves and to be aware, hopefully we can move forward positively, and take our teams and all the people that we work with along with us on that journey. Thank you for having me.
Chris.
Yeah, I found it a really fascinating discussion. I think as somebody leading a practice, it's a lonely old job, and you do the best that you can, living on your wits, and actually to hear the other experiences, the other suggestions, both through the questions and from the panelists, I've found really helpful, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And thank you for putting the show together as it was.
Thank you, Chris. Sarah.
Hi. So thank you for having me. It's been a really interesting discussion, and a really good one to have, I think, kind of a year on from this time last year. I think is when this kind, people started talking about this really intensely, and I think that in some ways, progress has been made. That the fact that we are having this discussion, I think that people are starting to make kind of sort of definite moves towards change. I think that, obviously there is a lot more to do, but actually I'm really encouraged by kind of the sort of collectives that are springing up, by the fact that people are starting to tackle procurement, by the fact that we're having these conversations. That doesn't answer the question about what I'm going to do, but it tells you that I'm kind of I'm vaguely encouraged by what's happening at the moment, and I hope to continue being a part of discussions like this, and if not, kind of creative solutions kind of beyond that.
Thank you, Sarah. Harriet.
First of all, thank you as well for having me. It's been really enjoyable and a really interesting conversation. I'm going to be inarticulate, but one thing that popped into my head as Sarah was talking about the idea of cultural capital and the idea of education, and that carries sort of weight in the recruitment process or throughout the profession, is it dawned on me that in order to have strong architecture, that education has got to be back the other way, right? That means that there's no place for only high culture and snobbery. If you're the community that we all design for, if they also are watching EastEnders and the football, then there needs to be space in the houses that you design for a TV, and there needs to be that cultural capital sort of confluence, and I think that is perhaps not happening as strongly as it might right now in the profession. How that's going to make me do my job differently when I get go into work tomorrow, I have no idea, but it was just a sort of a thought. But I suppose what it doesn't underpin is what we've all been saying tonight is one of education, that that isn't a narrow field when we're trying to address diversity and inclusion in the workplace. That it's actually very broad, and the broader that your education can be as an individual and for your staff and for the practice in the profession, then all's the better. And so perhaps that's what I will take away from tonight. So thanks.
Thank you, all of you. I'd like to sort of summarise with a few thoughts of my own. It's been really interesting to hear you all speak. Mohammed, you talked about having an organic approach and being able to pull together people's identities in a way that's comfortable to them. Sarah, you talked about education. I think actually Melanie, education awareness, and really looking at yourselves, that sense of introspection. Harriet, the commitment to action, and it's not always straightforward, but that education piece really being up there. Sarah, equality of access and those safe environments, and ensuring that there's equity around the whole approach from beginning to end. And Chris, you talked about making sure there's no lip service there, that the way that you go about things isn't tokenistic, and trying to build a sort of sense of that psychological safety through the idea of family. And all of these things put together, brings me to the approach that I'm trying to bring into the RIBA, which is around this idea of cultural intelligence, which is something obviously that we've talked about quite a lot, given we're talking about, well, how do you create a culture of inclusion in the workplace? And so cultural intelligence is an intersectional approach to inclusion, where you're looking at what is it about me, whoever I might be in architecture, what is it about me which means that I can sometimes find it difficult to work with you? What biases do I have that means that I'm making decisions that I'm not even aware I'm making, and they are impacting you, whoever I am? And so it's that coming back to personal, individual, behavioural change, which even asks me to think about those political, ideological, economic, structural barriers which I have been socialised into. How can I question those? How can I circumnavigate them? How can I even undermine them if I have to, in order so I can be more inclusive in my behaviours? And the first part of that is, do I want to? Am I driven? Am I motivated to actually persist with working with those who are different from me? Am I willing to lean into my discomfort? If I'm not, how do I do that? And then the second piece is around knowledge. What do I know? What don't I know about those peoples whose values are so different to mine? They might seem alien, but it's not that I'm right and they're wrong. It's just a different perspective. I always like to pick up a coin. And I say, if I showed you this coin, what shape do you see? Well, yeah, it's a circle. If I showed you that side of a coin, it's a line. Who's right or wrong? It's just a different perspective. And that's what the CQ knowledge piece is about. CQ strategy is about planning and checking your assumptions and being hugely self-aware when going into these interactions, because if you have some motivation and you have some knowledge and you're just going straight into some kind of action, whether it's policy or recruitment or whatever it is, you're likely to act in a tokenistic and stereotypical way. And so you need to have that piece of planning and checking and self-awareness. And then finally, CQ action is about having a broad repertoire of adaptable behaviours. That's not about being inauthentic to yourself. It's about understanding that you do have to lean into your discomfort to adapt your behaviours to bring people along with you and to build a bridge between where you are and where they might be. And that's how we hope to be building an inclusive culture within the RIBA, and certainly sharing this with the rest of the architectural sector, with a clear idea that we need to role model this behaviour. We need to ensure we have the formal mechanisms, the procurement, the recruitment, the policies that support inclusion, that everyone has the training and skills and the opportunities to behave in a new way, and that we have the data. We need to foster that understanding, conviction, and people need to know why we're building this forward. And thank you very much indeed to RIBA London for putting this on. Very important part of the understanding why this is so important. Diane.
God, I was so engrossed in the conversations. That's it. It was just really nice for me to just switch my camera off and sit back and listen. I learned a lot this time than I guess I would have if I was hosting a session. So thanks, Marsha, for driving this conversation forward. And I'm sure everybody who's on the panel and those that are listening have some new intelligence and some new content to kind of sit down and think about and take to the office. So on behalf of RIBA London, myself and Jessica and the rest of the team would like to thank Marsha for chairing this, and also our panelists, Harriet, Mohammed, Melanie, Chris and Sarah, for just being open, honest and sharing and vulnerable at times. We really appreciate that. And for our audience, we'd like to thank you for staying with us. There's still quite a few of you on the call. And would also like to give a final shout out to our sponsor, Ibstock Brick, and to let you know that next week's session is about caring for our planet. So please join us. We've got some really interesting speakers lined up. And with that, I would like to wish you all a good evening, and hopefully you can catch the last bits of sunshine. Have a nice week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.